So in my paper, I wrote about how the church has affected women on like by oppression. And what I found is that in the early church, like dating back to right after Christ ascended back into heaven, that the church um, had allowed women to take leadership roles that like women typically wouldn't take in a church today. So there were women such as Monica of Hippo and Phoebe and Priscilla who were very high evangelists. They went out into the nations and shared the gospel. Priscilla was even, she worked right alongside Paul in the early church, and she helped spread the news about what Jesus had done for us. I also found, I spoke a little bit about the Me Too movement in the paper, and I talked about how the church oftentimes doesn't take into consideration like the impact that stuff like that has on women. So a lot of the people in a church are typically not going to, typically, this isn't always the truth, but sometimes they're not going to agree with the Me Too movement because they don't really see it as an issue. But there are leaders in the church who desire more of a outreach program. So Beth Moore, who is one of the leading ladies in the Southern Baptist Convention, she's a very popular, she writes a lot of devotions, and she's an author. She's very popular in like Christian culture. And she released a statement saying that she was very upset with how some of the leaders in the Southern Baptist Convention were not taking seriously the Me Too movement, and they weren't really taking into effect that had on women, or even the children that are in the church, which I spoke a little bit about in my paper. She was very upset with a statement that was released by the president at the time of the Southern Baptist Convention, and he released a statement saying that he like a man had catcalled another woman and he had saw it, and he said something about like she's built, like that was what he said, and he ended up like the woman turned around and fussed at the guy who said it, as she should, and then the president of the Southern Baptist Convention said, "Ma'am, he's just being biblical," like, and he may have meant that as a joke, but like that's a prime example of stuff that they don't think is a big deal. And that's really pushing women down in society, that's telling them that they're not worth more than their bodies. And that's an issue that I have with the church as a Christian, but that's the big thing that I took away from it. So I think as a church, if we ignore those things in society, then that's going to become a bigger issue later on. And that's what I discussed in my paper.